Rebecca Ward hated diplomatic meetings, but she hated being insulted even more. The transport shuttle had barely docked with the Galactic Council station when the first round of mockery began. Through the viewport, she could see the massive structure spinning slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Somewhere inside that metal beast, the DXZER collective waited to tear apart every trade proposal humanity had spent 6 months preparing. She checked the cargo manifest one more time. Medical supplies, check. Diplomatic credentials, check. Cultural exchange materials, check. And finally, the item that would cause the most trouble, her emotional support animal, Brutus. The honey badger sat in his reinforced travel habitat, grooming his thick black and white fur without a care in the universe. He had no idea that in a few hours, an entire delegation of alien species would be laughing at him. The airlock hissed open and Rebecca stepped into the reception bay. Immediately, 3 distinct groups of aliens turned to observe her arrival. The DXZER stood tallest, their reptilian bodies covered in dark green scales that caught the harsh station lighting. Their leader, a massive specimen named Hastok, wore minimal armor that showed off his muscular frame and sharp claws. Next to them, the insectoid Chitara clicked their mandibles together in what might have been conversation or criticism. The third group, the aquatic Volmari, floated in their water-filled mobility suits, their tentacles pressing against the transparent material as they watched. Hastok's eyes, cold and yellow, fixed on the travel habitat floating behind Rebecca on its anti-gravity platform. "What is that?" His voice came out as a deep rumble that vibrated through the deck plates. "My registered emotional support animal," Rebecca said, keeping her voice steady and professional. All paperwork was filed according to Galactic Council regulations. The DXZER leader threw back his head and laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Emotional support? What kind of weak species needs an animal to feel brave? He stepped closer, towering over Rebecca by almost 2 meters. The DXZER faced the universe with strength and honor. "We need no such pathetic assistance." One of the Chitara delegates scuttled forward on 6 legs, curious. "What species is this creature? It appears quite small and defenseless." The translator chip rendered the clicking sounds into standard galactic common. "He's a honey badger from Earth," Rebecca explained, moving to stand beside Brutus's habitat. Inside, the animal had stopped grooming and was now watching the aliens with dark, calculating eyes. "His name is Brutus. Brutus." Hastok repeated the name and laughed again. Several of his subordinates joined in, their deep voices creating a chorus of mockery. "A fierce name for such a tiny vermin. Tell me, human, does this Brutus protect you from bad dreams? Does he check under your bed for monsters?" The other species joined in the amusement. The Chitara's mandibles clacked rapidly, while the Volmari rippled their tentacles in what their culture considered laughter. Rebecca felt heat rising in her cheeks but maintained her diplomatic mask. She had been warned about DXZER arrogance, but experiencing it firsthand was different than reading about it in briefing documents. A shorter DXZER, introduced as General Rathek, circled the habitat with exaggerated curiosity. "It has such tiny legs, such a round body. Does it roll when it moves?" More laughter echoed through the bay. Rathek reached out with one clawed hand and banged loudly on the habitat's reinforced wall. "Wake up, little vermin. Show us your fierce Earth warrior." Brutus didn't flinch. He simply turned his head slowly toward Rathek, his small eyes focusing with an intensity that made the general pull back slightly. Then the honey badger yawned, showing sharp teeth before settling down into a sleeping position. "He's even more pathetic than I imagined," Hastok declared. "Come, human. Let us proceed to the negotiation chamber. I am eager to see if your trade proposals are as weak as your choice in companions." The group moved through the station's corridors, and Rebecca noticed how other species stopped to stare at her and Brutus. Word traveled fast in a closed environment like this. By the time they reached the negotiation chamber, a small crowd had gathered to witness the human with the ridiculous pet. The chamber itself was designed for comfort across multiple species. The DXZER had high, warm platforms. The Chitara preferred the cooler corners with rough surfaces for gripping. The Volmari had pressurized water columns they could rest in. Humans got basic chairs and tables, nothing special. Rebecca took her assigned seat and had Brutus's habitat positioned beside her. Hastok sat across from her, his bulk making the reinforced platform creak. "Before we begin these negotiations, I must express my concern." He gestured at Brutus. The Drakkar Collective questions whether humanity is ready for galactic partnership when you cannot even face a simple diplomatic meeting without bringing your security blankets. Brutus is not a security blanket, Rebecca said firmly. He's a registered companion animal completely within council regulations. Regulations? Rathek spat the word. Regulations are for the weak who hide behind rules. The strong make their own path. He moved closer to Brutus's habitat again, this time pressing his snout against the transparent material. Look at it. So harmless, so useless. This is what humans call a pet? Several Chitara delegates had approached as well, their antennae twitching with curiosity. On our world, we keep small insects for companionship, one explained. But they serve purposes. They clean waste, they pollinate gardens. What purpose does this honey badger serve? Rebecca took a slow breath. She could explain that Brutus was actually one of the most fearless and aggressive animals on Earth. Pound for pound. She could mention his reputation for fighting animals many times his size, his resistance to venom, his legendary determination. But something told her that words would mean nothing to these arrogant species. They had already made up their minds about humanity based on appearances. He provides companionship, Rebecca said simply. Not everything requires a practical purpose. Spoken like a true weakling, Hastok said. The Drakkar have conquered 17 star systems through strength and determination. We have never needed companionship from lesser creatures. We are the apex of evolution. The negotiations began poorly and got worse. Every human proposal was met with contempt. Every attempt at compromise was seen as weakness. Hastok kept glancing at Brutus, using the honey badger as evidence of human inferiority. The other species, taking their cue from the dominant Drakkar, began questioning whether Earth deserved any favorable trade agreements at all. 3 hours into the meeting, Rathek made his move. While Hastok was dismissing another human proposal, the general walked to Brutus's habitat and studied the locking mechanism. These human containers are so primitive, he announced loudly. So easy to open by accident. Rebecca started to stand, but Rathek had already pressed the release sequence. The habitat door slid open with a soft hiss. Everyone in the chamber froze, waiting for chaos, waiting for the human to panic and scramble to recapture her pet. Brutus emerged slowly, his stocky body moving with deliberate purpose. He stepped onto the chamber floor, stretched each leg one at a time, and then simply sat down. His nose twitched as he sampled the various alien scents. His eyes scanned the room, taking in each species with calm assessment. Then he yawned again and began to groom his paws. The chamber erupted in fresh laughter. Even the Volmari, usually the most diplomatic species, rippled with amusement. Here was the feared Earth animal, the emotional support companion, doing absolutely nothing threatening or impressive. Hastok rose to his full height, his shadow falling over both Rebecca and Brutus. This is what we are supposed to fear? This is what humans bring to intimidate us? He looked directly at Rebecca. Perhaps you need more than emotional support, human. Perhaps you need a lesson in what true strength looks like. Rebecca met his gaze without flinching. Beside her, Brutus had stopped grooming. The honey badger sat perfectly still now, watching Hastok with those dark, unblinking eyes. Something in the air had changed, though only Rebecca seemed to notice it. She recognized that look. She had seen it before, back on Earth, right before Brutus had taken on a cobra twice his length. Be careful, War Prime Hastok, Rebecca said quietly. You really should have done your research on Earth animals before making assumptions. But Hastok was already laughing again, and her warning was lost in the sound of alien mockery. The 4th hour of negotiations made the first 3 look friendly by comparison. Hastok had stopped even pretending to consider human proposals. Instead, he spent his time inventing new insults for Brutus, who had wandered to a corner of the chamber and appeared to be napping. Every time Rebecca tried to redirect the discussion to trade routes or resource sharing, the War Prime would gesture at the sleeping honey badger and question how humanity could manage complex galactic commerce when they could not even keep their pets awake during important meetings. Rathek had become bolder with Brutus loose. The general walked past the honey badger repeatedly, his heavy footsteps deliberately loud and threatening. Each time he passed, he would stomp harder, trying to provoke a reaction. Brutus never even opened his eyes. This only made the Drakkar more confident in their mockery. A Chitara delegate named Tisk approached Rebecca during a brief recess. I mean no offense, but perhaps you should return your animal to its container. The DXZER are using it as justification to reject all proposals. They claim any species that needs such emotional support cannot handle the pressures of galactic trade. Rebecca watched Brutus from across the chamber. The honey badger had shifted positions and was now lying on his back with all four legs in the air, looking completely ridiculous. Brutus stays, she said. If the DXZER can't focus on negotiations because a small animal is in the room, perhaps they're the ones who aren't ready for galactic partnership. Tisk's antennae twitched with what might have been respect or concern. It was hard to tell. The DXZER will not forget that statement. They do not handle challenges well. When negotiations resumed, Hastak's mood had darkened considerably. Someone must have reported Rebecca's comment to him. The War Prime leaned forward on his platform, his claws scraping against the metal surface with a sound that set Rebecca's teeth on edge. I understand you question DXZER readiness for partnership, Hastak said, his voice dangerously quiet. This is bold talk from someone who brings a useless animal to a diplomatic summit. Tell me, human, what would you do if I simply crushed your little pet right now? Would you cry? Would you call for help? Would you finally show us the true weakness that hides behind your diplomatic masks? Rebecca's hand tightened on her data pad. Threatening a registered companion animal violates council regulations. It would also be a declaration of hostile intent against Earth. Would it? Hastak stood and began walking slowly toward Brutus. Or would it simply be an accident? These things happen in stations with so many different species. A DXZER might step in the wrong place, not seeing such a small creature in his path. Every eye in the chamber followed Hastak's movement. The Volmari delegates had gone completely still in their water suits. The Chitara had backed away to the walls, their survival instincts warning them of incoming violence. Even Rathek looked uncertain about where this was heading. Brutus had rolled over and was now sitting up, watching Hastak's approach with focused attention. His nose twitched rapidly, processing scents and information. His body language had changed from relaxed to alert, though he made no threatening moves. Rebecca stood slowly. War Prime Hastak, I strongly advise you to return to your platform and resume negotiations. What you're suggesting would have serious diplomatic consequences. Diplomatic consequences, Hastak repeated, his tone mocking. He was now only 3 meters from Brutus. Your species talks endlessly about consequences and regulations and proper procedures. The DXZER believe in direct action. We prove our worth through strength, not words. He raised one massive foot over Brutus, holding it there in a clear threat. So small. So fragile. One step and this symbol of human weakness would be gone. Perhaps then we could have honest negotiations without this distraction. That's when Brutus made his first aggressive sound of the day. It started low in his chest, a rumbling growl that seemed far too large for his compact body. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth that were sharper and more numerous than the aliens had probably noticed during his earlier yawns. His hackles rose, making him look slightly larger, and his claws extended fully against the chamber floor. Hastak laughed. Oh, the little vermin has teeth. How terrifying. But Rebecca noticed he hadn't actually brought his foot down on Brutus. Something in that growl had triggered ancient instincts even in an alien species. The sound promised violence, promised pain, promised that any attack would be met with savage resistance. Rathek moved to his leader's side. War Prime, perhaps we should return to negotiations. The human has made her point. We have made ours. There is no need for this to continue. For a long moment, Hastak stood frozen in his threatening position. Pride fought with instinct in his yellow eyes. Finally, he lowered his foot away from Brutus, but his expression had hardened into something dangerous. You are right, General, Hastak said. There is a better way to handle this. He turned to face Rebecca directly. The DXZER Collective formally challenges the human delegation to prove their worth through combat. This is our right under Council Law, Article 73, Section 9. Or is your species too weak even for that? The chamber exploded with shocked clicking, rippling, and hissing from the various delegates. A Volmari representative immediately activated the council database, tentacles moving rapidly across their holographic interface. The War Prime is correct. Challenge rights are valid in disputes involving honor and worthiness. Each side may nominate a champion to fight on their behalf. Rebecca felt her heart pounding. This was exactly what Hastak wanted. Earth's military forces were impressive by human standards, but they had never faced DXZER warriors in personal combat. The report suggested DXZER were stronger, faster and more naturally armed than humans. Any marine or soldier she called from her ship would be at a serious disadvantage. What are the terms? Rebecca asked, buying time to think. Hasdock smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Simple combat to submission or incapacitation. No weapons beyond natural abilities. The winner's species gains favorable position in all trade negotiations. The loser accepts whatever terms the winner proposes. Those are extreme stakes, a Chitara delegate protested. Surely more reasonable terms could be arranged. The Drakkar do not deal in reasonable, Hasdock said. We deal in strength. Does the human accept, or will she admit that her species is too weak to deserve galactic partnership? Rebecca looked at Brutus. The honey badger had stopped growling but remained alert, watching Hasdock with unwavering focus. She thought about the report she had read before this mission. Drakkar warriors trained from birth in combat. They had natural weapons that evolution had honed over millions of years. Their pride demanded victory, which meant they would show no mercy. But she also thought about what she knew about Brutus. She remembered the day she had found him in a wildlife sanctuary on Earth, recovering from injuries he had gotten fighting a puff adder that had wandered into his territory. The sanctuary director had explained that honey badgers didn't really understand the concept of backing down. They fought lions, hyenas, venomous snakes, anything that threatened them. And they usually won not through size or strength, but through sheer relentless aggression and refusal to give up. An idea began forming in Rebecca's mind. It was crazy. It was completely against normal protocols. But nothing about this situation was normal anymore. Hasdock had escalated things beyond diplomacy. The Drakkar had made it clear they would never respect humanity based on words or credentials or proper procedures. They respected only one thing, proven strength. I accept the challenge, Rebecca said clearly. Hasdock's smile widened. Excellent. Choose your champion. I assume you will call for one of your warriors from your ship. I look forward to demonstrating true Drakkar superiority. Rebecca walked slowly across the chamber to where Brutus sat. She knelt beside the honey badger and he turned his attention to her. She could see intelligence in those dark eyes, recognition, trust. They had been through a lot together over the past 2 years. He had helped her through anxiety attacks during deep space flights. She had protected him from people who didn't understand his nature. I choose Brutus, Rebecca said, standing up and facing Hasdock. He will be my champion. For exactly 3 seconds, there was complete silence in the chamber. Then the laughter started. It began with the Drakkar and spread to every other species present. The Chitara clicked so hard some of them fell over. The Volmari rippled so violently that water sloshed in their suits. Even the neutral council observer, a species called the Orim who rarely showed emotion, made a sound that might have been a chuckle. Hasdock laughed so hard he had to steady himself against a platform. The human chooses her pet, her emotional support animal. This is beyond mockery, this is pure comedy. He wiped at his eyes with the back of his clawed hand. Very well, human. I accept your champion. And because you have provided me with such entertainment, I will fight personally rather than choose one of my warriors. It will be quick and painless for your little friend. Perhaps afterward we can discuss mounting him as a trophy. Rebecca kept her expression neutral, but inside her heart was racing. She had just committed to something that could go very wrong. Brutus was tough. Incredibly tough for his size, but Hasdock was massive. The physics alone seemed impossible. But she had seen something in that moment when Hasdock had threatened to step on Brutus. She had seen the war prime hesitate. She had seen ancient instinct override arrogant confidence, and she knew something that these aliens didn't know. Something that was written in every wildlife guide about honey badgers back on Earth. Honey badgers don't care about size. They don't care about odds. They don't care about anything except winning, and they never ever give up. News of the challenge spread through the station faster than light through a wormhole. Within 30 minutes, every species on board knew that a human had challenged a Drakkar war prime to combat, and the human's champion was a small Earth animal that most species had never heard of. By the time the ceremonial combat arena was prepared, more than 300 beings had gathered in the observation galleries. Some came to watch what they expected to be a quick Drakkar victory. Others came simply because they had never seen anything quite this strange before. Rebecca sat in the designated preparation area with Brutus in her lap. The honey badger seemed calm, grooming his claws with his teeth in a methodical process that he always performed before sleep. He had no concept of the spectacle he was about to become part of. no understanding that hundreds of aliens were betting on how quickly he would lose. A Volmari official flowed into the preparation area, its tentacles carrying several data pads. "I must review the combat rules with you," it said in a formal tone. "Standard Galactic Council combat regulations apply. The match continues until one combatant submits verbally, becomes unconscious, or is unable to continue. Killing is prohibited. All natural biological abilities are permitted." "Do you understand these terms?" "I understand," Rebecca said. The Volmari's tentacles twisted in a gesture that might have been concern. "May I speak informally for a moment?" When Rebecca nodded, it continued. "I have accessed Earth's biological database. Your honey badger is impressive for its size, but Warprime Hastock masses approximately 90 kilograms more and has significant reach advantage. The statistical probability of your champion's victory is less than 1%. It is not too late to withdraw and accept a diplomatic solution." Rebecca scratched behind Brutus's ears, earning a satisfied grunt from the animal. Brutus doesn't really understand statistics. He just understands that when something threatens him, he fights until it stops being a threat. "That is admirable philosophy," the Volmari said. "But philosophy does not overcome physical reality. I would hate to see an innocent creature harmed because of species pride." "Then you should probably warn Hastock," Rebecca said quietly. The Volmari looked at her for a long moment, its alien features unreadable. Then it flowed out of the preparation area without another word. Across the arena, in a much larger preparation area befitting his status, Hastock was surrounded by his warriors. Rathek helped him remove his decorative armor, leaving the Warprime in just his natural scales and claws. There was no need for protection against such a small opponent. "This is beneath you, Warprime," Rathek said. "Let me fight the creature. You should not risk your honor on something so trivial." "My honor is exactly why I must do this personally," Hastock replied. "The human insulted us by choosing such a pathetic champion. If I delegate this fight, it suggests I take her choice seriously. No, I will crush this honey badger myself quickly and completely. Then every species on this station will understand that the Drekar are not to be mocked." A younger warrior named Prel brought forward a data pad. "I accessed what little information exists about these Earth animals. They are omnivores, primarily insectivores. Their jaw strength is notable for their size, but nothing compared to Drekar bite force. They have thick skin that provides some defense against bites and stings. They are known for aggressive behavior when threatened." "Aggressive," Hastock laughed. "Everything is aggressive when threatened. Fear makes creatures lash out in desperation. But desperation is not the same as true combat skill." He flexed his claws, each one sharp enough to tear through metal. "This will take less than 1 minute." The ceremonial gong rang through the station, signaling that combat would begin in 5 minutes. The observation galleries were completely full now, with some species floating or climbing on the walls to find viewing space. The betting pools had reached ridiculous amounts. A few contrarian Chitara had placed small bets on the honey badger, not because they believed he could win, but because the payout would be enormous if the impossible happened. Rebecca carried Brutus into the arena. The space was exactly as the Volmari official had described, a circular platform 20 meters across with a slightly rough surface for traction. Bright lights shone down from above, and cameras captured every angle for the species who couldn't attend in person. In the galleries, the noise was deafening as hundreds of beings clicked, rippled, hissed, and vocalized in their native languages. She set Brutus down at one edge of the arena. The honey badger immediately began exploring, his nose working overtime to process all the new scents. He marked one corner with his scent glands, a typical territorial behavior. Then he sat down and waited, watching the opposite side of the arena where Hastock would enter. Hastock emerged to thunderous approval from the Drekar delegation. The Warprime walked on all fours into the arena, a more intimidating posture that showcased his full size and power. His scales gleamed under the lights, dark green with hints of black along his spine. His eyes locked onto Brutus, and he smiled that predator smile again. The Volmari official floated to the center of the arena, safely elevated above the combat zone. "This match is sanctioned under Galactic Council law. Combat will continue until submission or incapacitation. Killing blows are forbidden. Do both champions acknowledge the rules?" Hastock roared his acknowledgement, a sound that echoed through the arena and caused several smaller species to flinch in the galleries. Rebecca answered for Brutus, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Then let combat begin. The Volmari official retreated rapidly to a safe distance. Hastok didn't waste time with posturing. He immediately charged across the arena, closing the distance to Brutus in seconds. His strategy was obvious: end this quickly with overwhelming force. He raised one massive clawed hand, preparing to strike down at the honey badger with enough power to knock him unconscious instantly. That's when Brutus moved. The honey badger's reaction time was incredible. He dodged left just as Hastok's claws came down, the sharp points striking the arena floor with a screech of metal on metal. Before Hastok could recover, Brutus darted forward and bit down hard on the War Prime's front leg. The sound that came from Hastok was shock, mixed with pain. His scales, which could turn away most blades, had a weakness. The joints where leg met body had thinner protection for mobility. Brutus's teeth, designed by evolution to crack open turtle shells and tear through tree bark, found that weak point and clamped down with incredible pressure. Hastok tried to shake the honey badger off, but Brutus's jaw grip was unbreakable. The more the War Prime thrashed, the deeper those teeth sank. Blood, bright blue against the arena floor, began to drip from the wound. In the galleries, the noise had changed from mockery to shocked murmuring. The Chitara delegates who had bet on Brutus began clicking excitedly. The Volmari rippled with sudden interest. This was not going according to the expected script. Hastok slammed his leg against the arena floor, trying to crush Brutus between his limb and the hard surface. But the honey badger's skeletal structure was built to absorb exactly this type of punishment. His thick skin prevented the impact from causing serious damage. He held on, his growl now a constant rumble of determination. The War Prime changed tactics. He twisted his body and tried to bite at Brutus, his own jaws opening to reveal fangs that could inject powerful venom. But Brutus released his grip just long enough to reposition, avoiding the bite and immediately clamping down on a new location higher up Hastok's leg. "Get it off me," Hastok roared, no longer sounding confident or amused. He slammed his leg again, harder this time. Brutus grunted with impact but didn't release. His claws were now extended fully, digging into Hastok's scales for better purchase. Ratek moved toward the edge of the arena, clearly preparing to intervene. Rebecca stepped forward immediately. Article 73, Section 9, Subsection 4. No outside interference once combat has begun. Violation results in immediate disqualification and forfeiture of all stakes. The Volmari official who had been monitoring the combat immediately confirmed Rebecca's citation. The human is correct. All parties must remain outside the combat zone. Ratek froze, his claws clenching in frustration. He looked at Hastok, who was now bleeding from 3 separate puncture wounds on his front leg. The War Prime had stopped trying to shake Brutus off and was instead trying to position himself to use his superior weight and size. Hastok rolled, attempting to crush Brutus beneath his bulk. The honey badger released his grip and scurried away with surprising speed for something with such short legs. But instead of retreating to a safe distance, Brutus immediately circled around and launched himself at Hastok's hind leg. The pattern repeated. Bite, grip, hold. Hastok's attempt to counter. Brutal determination from Brutus. More blood on the arena floor. The galleries had gone nearly silent now. Everyone watching in disbelief as a creature weighing less than 15 kilograms battled a being more than 6 times his size. Hastok tried everything. He tried speed, but Brutus was quicker in short bursts. He tried strength, but couldn't get proper leverage on the honey badger's loose skin and compact body. He tried his venomous bite, but Brutus's natural resistance to toxins meant the venom had minimal effect. Nothing worked. 5 minutes into the match, Hastok was breathing hard. He had multiple wounds on all 4 legs and his movements had become more cautious, more defensive. The arrogance had drained from his eyes, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably close to fear. Brutus, for his part, looked energized. He had taken some hits. His fur was matted with Hastok's blue blood and his own red blood from a few scratches, but his dark eyes burned with relentless focus. He had gone into what Rebecca called his battle mode, a state where nothing existed except the fight. When Hastok tried another charge, Brutus went low, getting underneath the War Prime's guard. He climbed up Hastok's body using his curved claws, moving fast despite the Drekar's attempt to scrape him off. Within seconds, Brutus had reached Hastok's neck. That's when real panic entered the War Prime's eyes. Every predator species in the galaxy understood what it meant when an opponent went for the throat. Hastok reared back, standing on his hind legs and clawing at his own neck trying to dislodge the honey badger. But Brutus had found his position and locked in. The galleries erupted in chaos. Some species were cheering. Others were demanding the match be stopped. The DXZER delegation was shouting conflicting orders. And through it all, Rebecca stood quietly at the edge of the arena, watching her friend do what honey badgers had done for millions of years on Earth. Win against impossible odds. Hastock's roar shook the entire observation gallery. The war prime spun in circles, his massive body moving with desperate energy as he tried to dislodge the honey badger from his neck. His claws came up and scraped against his own scales, trying to reach Brutus without damaging himself. But the honey badger had positioned himself perfectly in that spot between the base of Hastock's skull and his shoulder blades where the DXZER's arms couldn't quite reach. Rebecca had seen this technique before. Back on Earth, wildlife documentaries showed honey badgers using similar tactics against leopards and hyenas. They would get to a position where the larger predator's advantages in size and strength became meaningless. Then they would just hold on, teeth locked in, waiting for the bigger animal to exhaust itself. Brutus's jaws were clamped around a fold of Hastock's neck skin. The thick scales there provided some protection, but the honey badger's teeth were designed to crack through the hardest substances. Slowly, methodically, those teeth were working deeper. Every time Hastock thrashed, the pressure increased. Every attempt to shake Brutus off only embedded those teeth further. Rathek was at the very edge of the arena now, his whole body tense with a desire to intervene. Several other DXZER warriors had joined him, all of them watching their leader struggle against an opponent they had mocked just an hour earlier. The shame on their faces was visible even across species lines. "This is madness," Rathek growled. "The creature must be using venom or some hidden weapon. Nothing that small should be able to fight like this." A Chitara scientist who had been monitoring the combat with multiple instruments clicked a negative response. "My scans show no external weapons, no technological enhancements, no chemical weapons beyond natural body chemistry. The honey badger is simply using physical combat techniques with remarkable efficiency." In the galleries, the betting pools had frozen. Nobody knew what to do when the impossible was happening right in front of them. A few entrepreneurial beings were already calculating new odds, new bets on whether Brutus could actually force a submission from the war prime. Hastock dropped to the ground and rolled, using his full body weight to crush Brutus against the arena floor. The impact made a sickening thud that caused several species to look away. For a moment there was hope among the DXZER delegation that this final desperate move had worked. Then Hastock rolled back over, and Brutus was still there, still attached, still grinding his teeth deeper into the war prime's neck. The honey badger's body had simply compressed and absorbed the impact. His skeletal structure evolved to survive cave-ins and attacks from much larger predators, had distributed the force across his entire frame. "Impossible," whispered one of the DXZER warriors. "Our war prime weighs 135 kilograms. How does that creature survive being crushed?" Rebecca could have explained about honey badger anatomy, about their incredibly loose skin that allowed them to twist and turn even when gripped by a predator's jaws, about their thick subcutaneous fat layer that acted as natural armor, about their flexible spine that could bend in ways that would break most other mammals. But she stayed silent, letting Brutus make his own argument about Earth biology. 8 minutes had passed since combat began. Hastock's movements were becoming slower, more labored. The multiple wounds on his legs were bleeding steadily, and his attempts to dislodge Brutus had become weak and uncoordinated. The war prime's breathing had turned ragged, each inhale sounding painful. Brutus adjusted his grip, releasing for just a fraction of a second before clamping down in a new position. This time, his teeth found something important. Hastock's eyes went wide and a gurgling sound came from his throat. Not fatal. The honey badger's instincts were too precise for that, but definitely painful and concerning. The war prime dropped to his stomach, his legs splaying out to the sides. His claws scraped weakly at the arena floor. The dominant, arrogant leader who had mocked humanity and its companion animals was now reduced to desperate survival mode. "Yield," Rathek called out from the arena's edge. "War prime, you must yield." But Hastock's pride still had strength. Through labored breaths, he growled, "Never. The DXZER do not surrender to vermin." Brutus growled in response, a sound that came from deep in his chest and seemed to vibrate through Hastock's entire body. The honey badger's teeth pressed deeper, and fresh blood began to flow from the new wound. Hastock's eyes started to lose focus, pain and blood loss taking their toll. The Volmari official floated closer, monitoring the situation carefully. War Prime Hastock, this match can end at any time with your verbal submission. Pride is not worth permanent injury. The creature will tire, Hastock wheezed. It must tire. Nothing can fight forever. But Rebecca knew better. She had seen Brutus fight with a rattlesnake for 45 minutes straight, neither giving an inch. She had watched him tear apart a reinforced shipping container over the course of 3 hours, because he wanted the dried meat inside. Honey badgers didn't have an off switch when it came to determination. They would fight until they won or until they literally couldn't move anymore. 10 minutes into the combat, something changed in Hastock's eyes. The war-hardened leader who had conquered 17 star systems finally had to face a truth that shattered his worldview. He was going to lose. Not to a worthy opponent, not to a fellow warrior species, but to a small earth animal that his entire delegation had laughed at. Hastock's legs trembled with the effort of holding himself up. Brutus's weight on his neck was nothing compared to his own mass, but the position was draining what remained of the War Prime's energy. Every movement caused pain from multiple wounds. Every breath came harder than the last, and those teeth at his neck were a constant reminder that this could get much worse, I submit, Hastock whispered, so quietly that only the sensitive audio equipment caught it. Louder, the Volmari official said, not unkindly. The verbal submission must be clear and witnessed. Hastock closed his eyes and something inside him broke. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the entire arena. I submit, I yield. The human's champion has defeated me. The galleries erupted into chaos. The Chitara clicked and scrambled over each other in excitement. The Volmari rippled so violently their water suits sloshed. Species that Rebecca didn't even recognize were making sounds of amazement and disbelief. The few who had bet on Brutus were celebrating fortunes won. The many who had bet against him sat in stunned silence. Rebecca moved to the edge of the arena. Brutus, she called firmly. Release. Good boy, Brutus, release. The honey badger's ears twitched at her voice. For a moment his instincts warred with his training. Every fiber of his being wanted to finish the fight, to ensure this threat would never return. But Rebecca's voice meant safety, meant trust, meant home. Slowly, reluctantly, Brutus opened his jaws and released Hastock's neck. The War Prime collapsed completely, his body going limp against the arena floor. Medical personnel from 3 different species rushed forward with hovering stretchers and emergency supplies. Hastock was breathing but barely conscious, his pride as damaged as his body. Brutus hopped down from Hastock's back and trotted across the arena to Rebecca. His gait was slightly uneven, and she could see bruises forming under his fur, but overall he looked remarkably good for having just fought a creature 6 times his size. When he reached her, he sat down and began grooming himself, licking the blue blood from his claws as if he had done nothing more interesting than catch a rabbit. The Volmari official floated to the center of the arena, its tentacles raised for attention. By the laws of combat challenge, I declare the human champion victorious. All terms of the challenge are now in effect. The human delegation has earned favorable position in all trade negotiations. Rathek stood at the arena's edge, staring at Rebecca with an expression that mixed shame, anger, and something that might have been respect. How? He asked simply.
How does such a small creature possess such strength?
Rebecca knelt beside Brutus, running her hand gently along his back to check for serious injuries. He's not strong, she said. Not compared to you. But on Earth we have a saying about honey badgers. They don't care. They don't care about size, about odds, about reputation. They just fight until they win. Your War Prime learned that lesson the hard way. Medical staff were loading Hastock onto a stretcher now, his wounds being treated with sprays and patches. The War Prime's eyes found Rebecca, and she saw something there she hadn't expected. Not just defeat, but understanding. He had underestimated not just Brutus, but everything Brutus represented. The diversity of Earth, the evolutionary pressures that created creatures like honey badgers, the fact that humans had survived on a planet where animals like this were normal. As Hastock was carried away, he managed to raise one clawed hand in a gesture of acknowledgement. Rebecca nodded back, the closest thing to respect that would pass between them. The galleries were still in chaos, everyone trying to process what they had witnessed. The Chitara delegation was already downloading everything they could find about Earth's animal species. The Volmari had begun formal discussions about establishing scientific exchanges to study Earth biology. Other species Rebecca hadn't even met yet were clamoring for introductions. But all of that could wait. Right now, Rebecca picked up Brutus, cradling his solid body against her chest. The honey badger, fresh from single-handedly defeating a galactic war prime, yawned widely and settled into a comfortable position. Within minutes, he was asleep, his breathing deep and regular. Rebecca looked up at the galleries, at hundreds of alien faces staring down at her with newfound respect and wonder. She smiled slightly. They should have done their research on Earth animals. They really should have done their research. The medical bay doors had barely closed behind Hastock when Rebecca's communicator exploded with incoming messages. Priority signals from Earth government officials, urgent calls from the human embassy, encrypted military channels demanding situation reports. She ignored them all for the moment, focusing instead on getting Brutus properly checked by the station's veterinary specialist. The veterinarian was a Volmari named Drift, who specialized in exotic biology. Its tentacles moved carefully over Brutus, checking for injuries while multiple scanners hummed in the background. The honey badger tolerated the examination with typical patience, meaning he occasionally growled warnings when Drift touched a particularly sore spot. "Remarkable," Drift kept saying in its watery voice. "Truly remarkable. Multiple impact injuries, tissue bruising, minor lacerations, but nothing requiring more than basic treatment. This creature's physiology is incredible. I have never seen such efficient damage resistance in a mammal this size." "Will he be okay?" Rebecca asked, holding a treat Brutus liked in case they needed to distract him. "More than okay. He should rest for a few days, avoid strenuous activity, but full recovery is expected." Drift's tentacles rippled with what Rebecca had learned to recognize as curiosity. "May I ask, is this honey badger typical of Earth fauna? Are all your planet's species this resilient?" Rebecca thought about how to answer that. Brutus is special even on Earth. But we have a lot of species that are tougher than they look. Evolution on our planet has been pretty competitive. "Competitive," Drift repeated, its translator chip giving the word an odd tone. "Yes, I am beginning to understand. The Galactic Council has classified only 12 planets as Class 7 death worlds. Earth is one of them. Perhaps we have not truly appreciated what that classification means." After Drift finished the examination and applied some healing gel to Brutus's bruises, Rebecca finally checked her messages. Most were variations on the same theme: shock that she had won the challenge, demands for explanation, urgent requests for meetings. But one message stood out. It was from Rathek, the DXZER general who had started this whole situation by releasing Brutus from his habitat. The message was brief. "We need to talk privately." Rebecca found Rathek waiting in a small observation room that looked out on the stars. The general stood with his back to the door, his posture stiff and formal. When Rebecca entered with Brutus padding along beside her, Rathek turned and immediately took 3 steps back. The honey badger had that effect now. "Thank you for coming," Rathek said, his voice carefully neutral. "I wanted to speak before the official negotiations resume tomorrow." Rebecca waited, letting him take the lead in this conversation. Brutus found a comfortable spot on the floor and settled down for another nap, unconcerned with galactic politics. "What happened today should not have happened," Rathek continued. "War Prime Hastock allowed pride to override judgment. I allowed it to happen by encouraging his mockery of your companion. The DXZER were wrong." Those last 4 words clearly cost him something. Rebecca nodded slowly. "I appreciate you saying that." "Do not appreciate too quickly," Rathek said, his tone hardening slightly. "The DXZER collective has been humiliated in front of the entire galactic community. Our war prime was defeated by a creature smaller than his head. This will have consequences that extend far beyond trade negotiations." "I didn't want this," Rebecca said honestly. "I came here for trade agreements, not combat challenges. Hastock pushed the situation to this point. I know. Which is why I am here." Rathek moved closer, though he kept careful distance from Brutus. "There are factions within the DXZER military who will see today's events as justification for more aggressive posturing against humanity. They will claim we must restore honor through strength. They will push for military demonstrations, territory disputes, anything to prove that one combat loss does not define us." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. "You're saying today's victory might have made things worse?" "In the short term, yes. The DXZER do not accept defeat gracefully." Rathek's claws flexed unconsciously. But I am also saying that some of us understand what today truly revealed. Your honey badger did not win through size or natural weapons. He won through determination, strategy, and refusal to yield. These are qualities the DXZER claim to value above all others. If a small earth animal possesses them in such quantity, what does that say about humanity itself? It says you should probably be more careful about making assumptions, Rebecca suggested. Rathek's mandibles twitched in what might have been the DXZER equivalent of a smile. Indeed, which brings me to my actual purpose. I have been authorized to negotiate preliminary terms before the formal session tomorrow. The DXZER Collective wishes to move forward with the trade agreement, on terms favorable to Earth as the challenge results require. But we also have a request. What kind of request? We wish to establish an exchange program. DXZER warriors would travel to Earth to study your planet's fauna and the evolutionary pressures that created species like the honey badger. In return, we would offer military technology exchanges and training partnerships. We want to understand the death world that shaped humanity. Rebecca blinked in surprise. This was not what she had expected. You want to study Earth's animals? We want to understand why we lost today, Rathek said bluntly. The DXZER have conquered through superior force for centuries. Today, we learned that force has limits. Your planet clearly taught you and your species something different. We would learn those lessons. Before Rebecca could respond, her communicator buzzed with an urgent priority signal. She glanced at the screen and saw it was from the Chitara delegation head, the one who had observed the entire challenge. The message preview read, "Must speak immediately. Significant proposal regarding Earth biology." "Looks like you're not the only ones interested in Earth," Rebecca said to Rathek. The general's expression became unreadable. "No. I suspect today's events will change how every species views humanity. The question is whether those changes will be beneficial or dangerous for your people." He left without another word, and Rebecca was alone with Brutus again. She sat down beside him, scratching behind his ears while he made satisfied grumbling sounds. "You've made quite an impression, buddy," she told him. "I just hope we can handle all the attention." Over the next several hours, Rebecca took meetings with 7 different species delegations. The Chitara wanted biological samples and research partnerships. The Volmari requested permission to establish an embassy on Earth, specifically to study planetary ecology. 2 species Rebecca had never even met before introduced themselves and immediately began discussing trade deals that favored human interests heavily. But the most interesting meeting came from a species called the Orvan, slender beings with crystalline structures in their skin that caught and reflected light. Their representative, whose name translated roughly as Shimmer, had a different perspective entirely. "Other species see today's events as surprising or shocking," Shimmer said, its voice like wind chimes. "But the Orvan see it as confirmation of something we have suspected since humanity joined the galactic community. You are a young species from a harsh world, and you bring that harsh world's lessons with you. The honey badger did not win because it was the strongest or fastest. It won because it understood that survival sometimes requires fighting opponents you cannot possibly defeat. That is a very human philosophy." Rebecca considered that. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" "Both," Shimmer said simply. "The galaxy has been relatively peaceful for 3 centuries because most conflicts are resolved through diplomacy or economic pressure. Combat challenges are rare because most species understand their limitations. But humanity does not seem to recognize limitations the same way. You see obstacles as things to overcome rather than boundaries to respect. That makes you either the most dangerous species in the galaxy or the most valuable. Perhaps both." After Shimmer left, Rebecca checked on Brutus one more time. The honey badger was sleeping soundly, his body curled into a tight ball. He had no idea that he had become the most famous animal in galactic history. He didn't care about politics or species relations or trade negotiations. He had done what honey badgers always did, fought when threatened and won through sheer determination. Rebecca's communicator buzzed again. This time it was a message from Earth's diplomatic corps. The Secretary of State himself wanted a full briefing. The message included a note that made Rebecca smile. "Preliminary reports suggest you used your emotional support animal as a combat champion. Please confirm this is accurate and not a translation error. If accurate, please explain your reasoning. Also, please advise if we should be issuing honey badgers to all diplomatic staff." She started drafting her response, trying to figure out how to explain the last 8 hours in a way that made sense. How do you tell your superiors that you accidentally changed humanity's position in galactic politics by letting your pet fight an alien war leader? How do you explain that sometimes the best diplomatic strategy is recognizing when diplomacy has failed and you need a different approach? Her communicator buzzed yet again. Another species wanting to meet. Another delegation requesting information about Earth's biology. Another opportunity created by Brutus's unexpected victory. It was going to be a very long night. But as Rebecca looked at her sleeping honey badger, she felt something she hadn't felt when she first arrived at this station. She felt proud, not just of Brutus, though he had certainly earned it, but of Earth itself. Humanity came from a planet that created creatures like honey badgers, animals that refused to accept defeat no matter the odds. That heritage meant something. Today had proved it. Tomorrow, formal negotiations would begin. The Drakkar would honor the terms of the challenge, giving Earth favorable trade agreements. Other species would vie for humanity's attention, wanting access to Earth's biological knowledge and maybe its philosophy of never giving up. The galaxy had seen humanity as young and inexperienced. Now they saw something different. They saw a species that brought honey badgers to diplomatic meetings, and that changed everything. 3 weeks had passed since the challenge, and the Galactic Council Station had transformed into something Rebecca never expected. What started as a simple trade negotiation had evolved into the most significant diplomatic event in recent galactic history. Species from sectors she had never heard of were sending representatives, all wanting to meet the human who brought a honey badger to fight a war prime. The formal negotiations had concluded 2 days ago with terms so favorable to Earth that Rebecca's superiors had initially thought she made an error in the translation. The Drakkar had honored every aspect of the challenge results, granting humanity access to trade routes that would cut shipping times by 40%, and resource agreements that would supply Earth's growing space colonies for decades. But more importantly, they had done something unprecedented in their military culture. They had apologized. Hastok himself had appeared at the final negotiation session, his neck still wrapped in medical bandages. The war prime had stood before the assembled delegates and spoken words that Rebecca suspected caused him physical pain. The Drakkar collective misjudged humanity, Hastok had said, his voice steady despite the obvious difficulty. We saw your youth as a species and assumed weakness. We saw your emotional attachment to companion animals and assumed sentimentality. We were wrong on both counts. The honey badger Brutus taught us that strength comes in many forms, and the human Rebecca Ward demonstrated that wisdom sometimes means choosing unexpected champions. The Drakkar honor this lesson. It was the closest thing to a formal apology his culture allowed, and the other species had recognized its significance. The Chitara delegation had actually applauded, their clicking mandibles creating a sound like rainfall on metal. But the real changes went beyond trade agreements. In the 3 weeks since the fight, galactic society had become obsessed with Earth's biodiversity. The station's information networks were overwhelmed with requests for data about Earth animals. Documentaries about African wildlife became the most downloaded entertainment across 12 sectors. A betting pool had started on which Earth animal would be most dangerous in combat, with candidates ranging from saltwater crocodiles to mantis shrimp to the humble goose. Rebecca sat in what had become her regular spot in the station's observation deck, watching ships come and go through the viewport. Brutus was in her lap as usual, completely unconcerned with his celebrity status. A Volmari scientist named Gentle Current had just finished another session of non-invasive scans, trying to understand the honey badger's remarkable physiology. I have analyzed his muscle density, bone structure, skin composition, and neurological response patterns, Gentle Current had explained earlier. The efficiency is remarkable, but what truly sets him apart is something I cannot measure with instruments. It is attitude. He simply does not recognize the concept of an unwinnable fight. Now, as Rebecca scratched behind Brutus's ears, she reflected on how accurate that assessment was. Honey badgers had survived millions of years by refusing to give up. They fought cobras, leopards, lions, anything that threatened them. Size didn't matter. Odds didn't matter. They just fought until they won or physically couldn't continue. Her communicator chimed with an incoming call from Earth. It was her supervisor at the diplomatic corps, a woman named Director Hall who had seemed perpetually worried every time they spoke over the past 3 weeks. Captain Ward. Hall's face appeared on the small screen. I'm calling with news that you're either going to love or hate. Probably both. What's happened now? Rebecca asked, already bracing herself. The president wants you to lead a new initiative. Earth is establishing the Department of Interspecies Biology and Cultural Exchange. Basically, your job will be introducing the galaxy to Earth's ecosystems while learning about theirs. You'll have a full team, unlimited budget, and direct authority to negotiate knowledge-sharing agreements with any willing species. Rebecca blinked. That's a significant promotion. It's a completely new branch of government created specifically because a honey badger won a fight, Hall said, but she was smiling. The council is taking it seriously, though. 17 species have already submitted formal requests to participate in the program. The DXZER want to send a military delegation to Earth to study what they're calling Death World survival tactics. The Chitara want to establish a biological research station in the Amazon rainforest. Even the Orvan, who usually avoid physical interaction with other species, want cultural exchanges. What about Hastok? Rebecca asked. I heard he recovered from his injuries, but I haven't seen him since the final negotiation. Hall's expression became more serious. That's the other reason I'm calling. The War Prime has requested a private meeting with you before you leave the station. He says it's a matter of personal honor, not official DXZER business. After the call ended, Rebecca spent an hour preparing for the meeting. She made sure Brutus was fed and rested, knowing the honey badger's presence might be necessary depending on how the conversation went. Then she headed to the private meeting room Hastok had designated. The War Prime was already there, standing by the viewport and looking out at the stars. His neck bandages had been removed, revealing pale scars where Brutus's teeth had found their mark. When Rebecca entered, he turned to face her, and she saw something different in his yellow eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something thoughtful. Thank you for coming, Hastok said. I wanted to speak with you away from official channels and political necessity. Rebecca waited, one hand resting lightly on Brutus's back. The honey badger was alert but calm, watching Hastok with those dark eyes that missed nothing. I have been a warrior for 43 cycles, Hastok continued. I have fought in border conflicts, suppressed rebellions, won 17 challenge combats. I believed I understood strength in all its forms. Then I fought your honey badger. He moved closer, though he maintained a respectful distance from Brutus. When he attached to my neck, I had a moment of clarity. I realized I was going to lose. Not because he was stronger or faster, but because he would never stop. No matter what I did, no matter how much damage I inflicted, he would keep fighting until one of us couldn't continue. That is a purity of purpose I have never encountered. Honey badgers are stubborn, Rebecca agreed. It is more than stubbornness. It is existential commitment to survival. Hastok's claws flexed an unconscious gesture. After the combat, I researched Earth's evolutionary history. I learned about extinction events, climate shifts, predator pressures. Your planet has experienced catastrophes that would have ended most worlds' development of complex life. But instead, it created species like the honey badger, creatures that survived by refusing to accept defeat. He paused, and Rebecca saw him struggling with something. Finally, he continued. The DXZER conquered through strength, but we have grown complacent. We assumed our natural advantages would always prevail. Your companion animal, this creature that my entire delegation mocked, taught us that assumption was dangerously wrong. He gave me these scars, but he also gave me a gift. He reminded me that true strength is not about size or natural weapons. It is about the will to continue when every logical instinct says to give up. Hastok reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out something wrapped in dark cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small carved statue. It depicted Brutus in remarkable detail mid-fight, his teeth bared and his eyes fierce. The craftsmanship was incredible. This is made from a substance called honor stone. In DXZER culture, we carve statues of worthy opponents, warriors who taught us important lessons through combat. This is for you, or rather for Brutus. He earned a place in DXZER history. Rebecca took the statue carefully, surprised by its weight. Thank you. This means a lot. There is more, Hastok said. I am resigning as War Prime. The DXZER need leadership that understands the changing galaxy, someone who can adapt to new realities. I am going to Earth as part of the military exchange program. I want to learn from the world that created honey badgers. I want to understand what we have been missing. This revelation stunned Rebecca into silence. A DXZER War Prime, one of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. was giving up his position to become essentially a student on Earth. "The galaxy is changing," Hastock said, reading her expression. "Species like humanity are going to shape the future, whether established powers like the DXZER accept it or not. I choose to adapt rather than be left behind. Perhaps that is a lesson I learned from Brutus as well. Know when your old strategies no longer work and be willing to change." They talked for another hour, discussing Earth, the exchange programs, and what Hastock hoped to learn. The conversation was surprisingly easy, stripped of the political posturing that had dominated their first meeting. When it was time to leave, Hastock did something that Rebecca would remember for the rest of her life. He knelt down to Brutus's level and bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect in DXZER culture. Brutus, for his part, sniffed Hastock's snout curiously, decided the war prime was no longer a threat, and wandered off to investigate an interesting corner of the room. Rebecca left the meeting feeling lighter somehow. The galaxy was opening up to humanity, not because of military might or economic pressure, but because a honey badger had refused to give up in a fight. It was absurd and perfect and very, very human. 2 days later, Rebecca stood at the docking port with Brutus preparing to board the transport back to Earth. A crowd of various species had gathered to see them off. Gentle Current was there, along with several Chitara scientists. Shimmer represented the Orvan. Even Rathek had come, standing in for the DXZER collective. "You have changed things," Shimmer said, its crystalline structures catching the light. "The galaxy will not forget the human who brought a honey badger to a diplomatic summit." "I just brought my friend," Rebecca said simply. "Exactly," Shimmer replied. "You did not try to impress us with military might or advanced technology. You simply brought a companion from your world and let him be himself." That authenticity resonated across species boundaries. It showed us who humanity truly is. As the transport departed and the station grew smaller in the viewport, Rebecca thought about everything that had happened. She had come to negotiate trade agreements and had accidentally sparked a biological and cultural revolution across multiple sectors. Earth's animals were now galactic celebrities. Humanity's position in the council had shifted from junior members to respected partners. And all because Brutus had done what honey badgers always do. The honey badger in question was already asleep in his habitat, content and unconcerned with galactic politics. He had fought because he was threatened, won because he refused to lose, and now he was going home. For Brutus, it was just another day. But for humanity and the galaxy, it was the beginning of a new era. An era where strength was measured not just in firepower or size, but in determination and refusal to yield. An era where a species from a death world brought their planet's lessons to the stars. Rebecca smiled and settled in for the long journey home. She had reports to write, programs to organize, and a whole new department to build. But right now, she just wanted to rest and watch Brutus sleep. After all, they had both earned it. Somewhere in the galaxy, the story of the honey badger who defeated a war prime was already spreading. It would be told and retold, becoming legend. Species would debate its meaning and implications for generations. But Rebecca knew the truth was simpler than any legend. Never underestimate Earth. Never underestimate humanity. And definitely never underestimate a honey badger. The galaxy had learned that lesson, and they would not forget it.